Chapter 40. The long path zigzagged up a cliff face, and leaving the lower world behind, we came over the top into the upper Parnassus. A vernally cool wind blew across 2 or 3 miles of meadowland. Beyond, somber black firwoods and gray buttresses of rock climbed, arched, and finally disappeared into fleecy white clouds. Allison dismounted, and we walked over the turf beside the muleteer. He was about 40, with a fierce mustache under a broken nose and a fine air of independence about him. He told us about the shepherd life, a life of sun hours, counting, milking, brittle stars and chilling winds, endless silences broken only by bells, alarms against wolves and eagles, a life unchanged in the last 6,000 years. I translated for Allison. She warmed to him at once, establishing a half-sexual, half-philanthropic rapport across the language barrier. He said he had worked in Athens for a time, but then Hipparchi Esikia. There was no silent peace there. Allison liked the word. Esikla, Esikla, she kept on repeating. He laughed and corrected her pronunciation, stopping and conducting her, as if she were an orchestra. Her eyes flicked defiantly at me to see if she was behaving properly in my eyes. I kept a neutral face, but I liked the man, one of those fine rural Greeks who constitute the least servile and most likable peasantry in Europe, and I couldn't help liking Allison for liking him back. On the far side of the grassland, we came to 2 kalivia, rough stone huts by a spring. Our muleteer was taking another path from then on. Allison fished impulsively in her red Greek shoulder bag and pressed on him 2 packets of airline cigarettes. Esikia, the muleteer said. He and Allison stood interminably shaking hands while I took their photo. Esikia, Esikia, tell him I know what he means. He knows you know. That's why he likes you. At last we set off through the firs. You think I'm just sentimental. No, I don't. But 1 packet would have been enough. No, it wouldn't. I felt 2 packets fond of him. Later she said, that beautiful word. It's doomed. We climbed a little way. Listen. We stopped on the stony track and listened, and there was nothing but silence. Esikia, the breeze in the fir branches. She took my hand and we walked on. The path mounted interminably through the trees, through clearings alive with butterflies, over rocky stretches where we several times lost the path. As we came higher, it grew cooler, and the mountain ahead, a damp polar gray, disappeared completely into the cloud. We spoke very little because we seldom had breath to speak, but the solitude, the effort, the need I had continually to take her hand, to help her when the path became, as it frequently did, a rough staircase rather than a path, all this broke some of the physical reserve between us, instituted a sort of sexless camaraderie that we both accepted as the form. It was about 6 when we came to the refuge. It was tucked away above the tree line in a goyal, a minute, windowless building with a barrel-vaulted roof and a chimney. The door was of rusty iron, perforated with jagged bullet holes from some battle with the communist andarte during the Civil War. We saw 4 bunks, a pile of old red blankets, a stove, a lamp, a saw, and an axe, even a pair of skis, but it looked as if no one had stayed there for years. I said, I'm game to call it a day here. But she didn't even answer, simply pulled on a jumper. The clouds canopied us, it began to drizzle, and as we turned up over a crest, the wind cut like January in England. Then suddenly the clouds were all around us, a swirling mist that cut visibility down to 30 yards or less. I turned to look at Allison. Her nose had gone red, and she looked very cold, but she pointed up the next boulder-strewn slope. At the top of it, we came to a col, and miraculously, as if the mist and the cold had been a small test, the sky began to clear. The clouds thinned. were perfused by oblique sunlight, then burst open into great pools of serene blue. Soon we were walking in sunshine again. Before us lay a wide basin of green turf, ringed with peaks and festooned by streaks of snow still clinging to the screes and hollows of the steeper slopes. Everywhere there were flowers, harebells, gentians, deep magenta-red alpine geraniums, intense yellow asters, saxifrage. They burst out of every cranny in the rocks. They enameled every stretch of turf. It was like stepping back a season. Allison ran on ahead, wildly, and turned, grinning, her arms held out, like a bird about to take wing, then ran on again, dark blue and jeans blue in absurd, childish swoops. Lickery, the highest peak, was too steep to be climbed quickly. We had to scramble up, using our hands, resting frequently. Near the top, we came on beds of violets in bloom, huge purple flowers that had a delicate scent. And then at last, hand in hand, we struggled up the last few yards and stood on the little platform with its crowning cairn. Allison said, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" On the far side, a huge chasm plunged down 2,000 feet of shadowy air. The westering sun was still just above the horizon, but the clouds had vanished. The sky was a pale, absolutely dustless, absolutely pure azure. There were no other mountains near to crowd the distances out. We seemed to stand immeasurably high, where land and substance drew up to a narrow zenith, remote from all towns, all society, all drought and defect, purged. Below, for 100 miles in each direction, there were other mountains, valleys, plains, islands, seas. Attica, Boeotia, Argolia, Achaia, Locris, Aetolia, all the old heart of Greece. The setting sun richened, softened, refined all the colors. There were deep blue eastern shadows and lilac western slopes, pale copper-green valleys, tanagra-colored earth, the distant sea dreaming, smoky, milky, calm as old blue glass. With a splendid classical simplicity, someone had formed in small stones, just beyond the cairn, the letters Theta, Omega, Sigma. Light. It was exact. The peak reached up into a world both literally and metaphorically of light. It didn't touch the emotions. It was too vast, too inhuman, too serene, and it came to me like a shock, a delicious intellectual joy marrying and completing the physical one, that the reality of the place was as beautiful, as calm, as ideal, as so many poets had always dreamed it to be. We took photographs of each other, of the view, and then sat down on the windward side of the cairn and smoked cigarettes, huddled together because of the cold. Alpine crows screeched overhead, torn in the wind as cold as ice, as astringent as acid. There came back the memory of that mind voyage Conchis had induced in me under hypnosis. They seemed almost parallel experiences, except that this had all the beauty of its immediacy, its uninducedness, its being-nowness. I looked covertly at Allison. The tip of her nose was bright red, but I was thinking that after all she had guts, that if it hadn't been for her we wouldn't have been there. This world at our feet, this sense of triumph, this transcendent crystallization of all I felt for Greece. You must see things like this every day. Never like this. Never ever beginning to be like this. 2 or 3 minutes later she said, "This is the first decent thing that's happened to me for months. Today, and this." After a pause she added, "And you." "Don't say that. I'm just a mess, a defilement. I still wouldn't want to be here with anyone else." She stared out toward Eboa. Bruised face, being dispassionate for once, she turned and looked at me. "Would you? I can't think of any other girl I've ever known who could walk this far." She thought it over, then looked at me again. What an evasive answer that was. "I'm glad we came. You're a trooper, Kelly. And you're a bastard, Oof." but I could see that she wasn't offended.